Hey guys, welcome to Calm History. My name is Stefan. Tonight we begin in the soft hush of a Mesopotamian night, somewhere around 3200 BC. The stars are thick above you, clustered like beads of millet spilled across velvet. You're standing in a dirt paddock, just beyond the flickering firelight of a sleepy village, watching a hunched shepherd count his goats with a stick, a sigh, and a patience that suggests he's done this every evening since the Euphrates was a stream. Hey, if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now find a cozy spot. Take a slow, deep breath, and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. Congratulations. You're not sure how you got here, barefoot, with a mild stomachache from that lentil mash earlier, but it doesn't matter. You're here to witness the earliest sparks of bureaucracy. Oh yes, paperwork is about to enter human history, and no, you probably won't survive this if you're the kind of person who loses your receipts. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're handed a lump of clay by the shepherd, rough, damp, and vaguely goat-scented. He mutters something and gestures for you to press a small carved token into its surface. It's shaped like a peanut, which apparently represents goat. You press 5 of them. That's how many he counted. You look up. One goat has just chewed through the reed fence and is trotting smugly away. Now you have 4 goats and 1 clay lie. That's basically how record-keeping began, clay lumps and tokens to capture the truth, give or take one escape artist. Historians still argue whether these early clay records were mainly about taxation, trade, or sheer paranoia about goat theft. But either way, these weren't just doodles, they were business. Little portable records of who owed what, who owned what, and how many goats made it back before nightfall. You notice the shepherd has a small pouch with tokens, ovals for sheep, triangles for grain, and one that suspiciously resembles a jelly bean. You ask what that one means? He shrugs and says, "Used to mean be swarm, but now I use it for urgent debts." Right. As the goats settle into their bleeding, clove-scented rest, the shepherd explains that counting goats isn't just a chore, it's protection. Because tomorrow morning, he's expected to show up at the village storehouse and trade 5 goats for barley. And if he claims he brought 5 but only 4 actually appear, he'll need a receipt. So, you help him wrap the token-laden clay ball, called a bulla, in another layer of wet clay. He seals it, makes a little stamp with a stick, and scratches a mark that looks suspiciously like the world's most anxious smiley face. That's his signature. Sort of. You marvel at how this sticky lump is, in essence, the ancestor of your CVS receipts. Only shorter. And with fewer coupons. By the firelight, a neighbor approaches with 2 jars of beer and a question. How many goats did the other guy bring last week? The shepherd doesn't answer. Instead, he pulls out another bulla, taps it gently, and says, "Ask the clay." It's oddly satisfying, like letting your inbox handle the drama. You trail along to a low, dusty building where other villagers are whispering and comparing their clay pieces under torchlight. It's like a sleepy midnight farmer's market, but for nerds. One guy is furious because someone used a triangle token when they clearly traded sheep, not grain. A minor scandal. Still, this is how trust is built. You realize these clay receipts are like memory insurance. They don't need batteries, can't be accidentally deleted, and best of all, if you throw one at someone, it hurts. Multifunctional. As you sit on the cool ground, the night deepens. Someone's playing a sleepy tune on a bone flute. Somewhere, a baby goat sneezes. The scent of firewood and crushed coriander drifts on the breeze. And you, visitor from the future, are now part of history's first accounting system. You are clutching a goat receipt. You may not have toothpaste, but by the gods, you have data. You wake before the sun does. Well, technically you never went to sleep, since the ground is hard and at least one goat tried to nap on your legs. The shepherd's already stirring, groaning as he rises with the grace of a person who's counted goats for 40 years and isn't entirely sure why. He nudges you with his toe and hands you another clay lump, still damp from last night. Today, you're headed into town. He gestures toward a woven basket tied shut with frayed rope. Inside are 5 slightly annoyed goats, their beady eyes glaring as though they know they're about to be part of an economic transaction. You trail behind him as the sun bleeds up over the low hills, bathing the dusty path in gold. As you walk, you notice he's carrying a small satchel of odd, spherical clay objects. "Bully," he says with a grin. "Receipts for everything. Goats. Beer. That time my cousin borrowed my sandals and pretended he didn't." You don't question it. You're too busy watching how the early light hits the village of Uruk in the distance, mud brick houses glowing like honey, and thin trails of smoke curling up into a sky still cool and forgiving. By the time you reach the trading post, your shoulders ache, the goats smell like regret, and you're wondering how these people manage any kind of civilization when just walking somewhere required 3 breaks and a cucumber snack. The trading post is simple, a shaded pavilion with wide tables, baskets of barley, folded fabrics, pottery, and a long clay bench occupied by a man who looks like he's been annoyed since birth. He's the local merchant scribe hybrid, and he's cradling a clay tablet the way someone might cradle a grudge. The shepherd greets him with a gruff nod, unties the goat basket, and starts the trade. But here's where it gets fun, because this isn't a barter. This is a transaction. The merchant takes one look at the bull the shepherd hands over, nods, and cracks it open with a small hammer. Inside, 5 tokens, all peanut-shaped. Exactly what was agreed. He pulls a fresh slab of clay, smooth as a pudding surface, and begins to write. With a sharpened reed stylus, he scratches neat, wedge-shaped marks, cuneiform. It's mesmerizing. You realize you're watching the world's first invoice being written in real time. And what does it say? Essentially, received from smelly shepherd 5 goats, in exchange for 60 measures of barley, deliverable next new moon. No backsies. The inkless imprint of ancient bureaucracy. Then comes the sealing process. He pulls out a tiny stone cylinder, his seal, and rolls it across the wet clay. A design emerges, dancing lions, a star, a man with comically large eyebrows. That's his personal stamp. Like an ancient QR code with artistic flair. You learn that these sealed tablets serve a dual purpose. They're contracts, but they're also legal protections. If there's ever a dispute about the number of goats, or whether someone's barley was full of pebbles, you've got a sealed receipt, tucked into an archive, waiting to clear someone's name. Historians still argue whether the bully were meant to be broken regularly or only in cases of suspicion. Some think they were never meant to be cracked at all, just symbols of trust. Others say, trust doesn't feed your family, clay does. As this unfolds, a young girl arrives with her own token ball, this one filled with tiny cone shapes. Dates, she says proudly. Traded for honey. Last week. Her mother waits behind her, arms crossed, ready to back up the story if necessary. The merchant inspects the bulla, nods, and gives her a fresh tablet with scribbles that look like someone dreaming of pastries. Suddenly, the idea hits you. This system, these goat tokens and scribbled clay slips, is a language. A financial language born not of desire, but necessity. They're tired of being lied to. Tired of being shortchanged. And maybe, just maybe, tired of goat disputes turning into fistfights. Your shepherd companion collects his barley, several sacks that smell oddly like oatmeal and mildew. You offer to help carry one. It's heavier than your dignity. You end up dragging it like a determined worm. As you leave the trading post, you glance back. The merchant is already helping another customer, this one offering a pigeon and a ceramic mug in exchange for something suspiciously labeled goat cheese substitute. Whatever that is. Back on the trail, your shepherd friend hums a tune. The goats, now lighter by 5, strut as though they've sold stock high. You wonder if they'll miss him. You don't talk much on the walk back. Just the sounds of feet on dirt, distant bird call, and your heart quietly adjusting to the fact that people have always wanted two things: food, and proof that someone owes them food. And thanks to the humble Bulla, they finally had both. Hey, if it's been a good one, drop a 1 in the comments to spread those good vibes. If things haven't been so great, type 2, just know you're not alone. I'm right here with you, and we'll keep moving forward together, one step at a time, toward more peace and lighter days ahead. You return to the village just as the sun climbs higher and the sleepy hush of morning gives way to the soft clatter of daily chores. Women knead dough under shea cloths, children run barefoot with sticks, and somewhere in the distance, a goat screams with the kind of existential angst only goats can muster. You pat your pouch, where a tiny clay tablet now rests. Proof of a deal. A dusty miracle. But you're not heading home just yet. The shepherd gestures toward the temple compound, a sprawling, terrace structure made of baked bricks and quiet authority. It's the economic heart of the town, where grain, wool, and even human labor are tracked with the obsessive precision of a particularly anxious librarian. And at the center of this system? The scribes. You pass through the temple gates with an offering, a small pouch of dried figs that smell like concentrated sunshine. It's the polite thing to do. Inside, everything is cooler, quieter. You hear the soft scrape of reeds on clay and the occasional exasperated sigh of someone who just realized they wrote 10 goats instead of 1. The scribe you meet has ink-stained fingernails, a slightly crooked nose, and the unmistakable air of a man who hasn't blinked in 30 minutes. His name is Ninurtasin, and he's been copying grain transactions for most of his adult life. He barely glances at you before motioning toward a bench. Sit. Watch. Try not to breathe too loud. You sit. On the table before him are a dozen tablets, some cracked and repaired with a kind of ancient glue, others fresh and soft. He's currently working on one labeled, roughly, Barley Transfers, Month of the Great Flood Festival. The handwriting is meticulous, each cuneiform wedged like a tiny footprint in wet sand. You ask how he learned to do this. He blinks. Scribal school. 10 years. I cried every day for the first 2. Turns out, scribe training was no joke. Students learn math, grammar, and the kind of memorization that would make modern law students weep. They practiced on clay until their wrists ached. And if they messed up, the teacher didn't yell, he handed them more clay. That's somehow worse. Ninurtasin pulls out a reference tablet from a shelf. This one's old, he says. Been here since before I was born. It details an inventory of goats offered to the goddess Inanna during a spring festival, 4 white, 3 brown, one suspiciously described as grumpy. He chuckles. That one kicked the priest. They still talk about it. As he works, you notice a second scribe arrive, a teenager with wild hair and a look of constant apology. She carries a clay envelope, sealed and stamped. Another dispute, she mutters. Ninurtasin sighs deeply. Is it goats again? It's always goats. She opens the envelope carefully, revealing a tablet with a record of a loan, 5 goats, to be returned with interest. But someone has scratched out part of the inscription. There's an argument brewing. Historians still debate whether ancient scribes were neutral parties or if they sometimes adjusted records for favored families or temple patrons. Some tablets even have corrected sections where old lines were smoothed over and rewritten, a kind of early backspace key, if your keyboard was mud and time. The young scribe is told to investigate. Check the witness seals, Ninurtasin instructs, and smell the clay. If it's from Naram's kiln, it might be forged. His clay's always a little fishy. Wait. Forged receipts? That's right. Where there's paperwork, there's fraud. Some merchants got clever, faking seals, copying old contracts, or changing the date by adjusting one mark. It wasn't common, but it happened. One infamous case, Ninurtasin says, involved a sheep trader who reused a goat receipt 7 times before someone noticed the goats kept changing color. You ask if he ever gets tired of clay. He laughs softly. Sometimes I dream in cuneiform. My wife once caught me writing in my sleep, on the wall. He pauses, then adds, It was a grocery list. 4 onions. 2 fish. 1 apology. He sets down his stylus and leans back. But this work? It matters. Without us, nothing stays remembered. A trade is just a breeze. A receipt? That's history. You realize he's right. In the swirl of memory and barter, these tablets are anchors. Proof that something happened. That someone promised. That goats, yes, even goats, mattered enough to be immortalized in clay. You thank him, and as you rise to leave, he hands you a small, palm-sized tablet. Blank. Try writing something, he says. Even if it's just your name. You do. The marks are shaky, uneven, and probably say something closer to mud hat than visitor, but it doesn't matter. You've joined the scribes. If only for a breath. And somewhere in a forgotten archive, a goat's legacy lives on. You leave the temple with your shaky little clay tablet still warm in your hand, feeling, if we're being honest here, a little proud of yourself. You may not have mastered cuneiform, but at least your goat didn't run away mid-transaction today. Baby steps. But now it's time for a reward. And in ancient Mesopotamia, there's no better way to celebrate a completed trade than with a tall, frothy jar of beer. Yes, beer. Not just the drink of choice, but practically its own food group in this civilization. Thick, sour, barely filtered, and often sipped through straws to avoid getting a mouthful of grainy sediment. Delicious and mildly chewy. You head toward the brewing quarter of the village, following your nose. The air is heavy with the smell of damp barley, smoke, and that unmistakable tang of fermentation. It's not exactly a modern brewery tour, but hey, there's something charming about a tavern made from reeds, bricks, and a roof that occasionally leaks. Inside, the brewer is a wide-shouldered woman named Tiamat, who slaps down a jug the size of your head before you can say a word. Goat trader? She asks, squinting at the receipt tablet tucked under your arm. You nod. She grunts. Barley's still warm. She serves you a thick brew called cass, made from lightly baked barley loaves soaked in water and fermented into a kind of porridge meets pint. It's not for everyone, but it's surprisingly refreshing after a morning of clay, counting, and existential goat logistics. As you sip through a long straw, wicker, slightly sticky, Tiamat pulls out her own set of tablets, rough, corner-chipped, but clearly well-used. Each one records beer transactions, how much barley she received, how much brew she owed, and who still hadn't paid for their last jug. That one, she says, jabbing a finger at a name etched with sharp angles, owes me 6 days' beer. Keeps saying his goat ate the receipt. You laugh. She doesn't. Turns out, beer and goats go way back. Ancient laborers were often paid in rations of grain and beer, and many temple workers received monthly allotments in both. There were even specific beer types for different professions. Lighter brew for farmers, darker for scribes. Priests got the fancy stuff. Of course. You flip through one of her older tablets and spot something strange, an entry listing. Goats X3, partial horn damage, traded for cass. So people were bartering goats directly for beer. And if that doesn't feel like payday, I don't know what does. Historians still argue whether beer was ever considered an official currency. But one thing's clear, it was counted, tracked, traded, and yes, taxed. Because if something is enjoyable, the government probably wants a piece of it. Tiamat explains that the temple sends someone monthly to record her barley use and make sure she's not skimming off the top. As if I'd water down the cass. She scoffs, then mutters, again. You ask if the scribes ever get beer themselves. Oh, sure, she says. Especially that old one, Ninurtisin. He drinks like a camel on a holiday. Somewhere, a goat sneezes outside. Tiamat leans in. Want to know the real trick? I keep an extra tablet. One I don't show them. She pulls out a smaller piece of clay, nearly smooth with wear. It lists certain patrons and extra servings, bonus beer for good gossip, or a goat delivered without fuss. It's her social ledger. You're oddly touched. Even 5,000 years ago, there were loyalty programs. You finish your brew and wobble slightly as you stand. Ancient beer has a way of going straight to your head when your last meal was a piece of charred onion and a fig that tasted like soap. As you leave, she hands you a tablet with your name, sort of, and a mark next to. 1 jar Cass. It's your first personal receipt. Your first official presence in a Mesopotamian ledger. Who knew your legacy would smell faintly of barley? Outside, the sun has risen high. Children are chasing each other with goat tails tied to sticks. A man pushes a cart full of cracked urns. 2 merchants argue about whose donkey is fatter. And everywhere, people carry clay, under arms, in slings, in baskets lined with wool. The weight of proof, promises, and past trades, all baked into sun-dried tablets. You make your way back to the dusty path, breathing in the thick, earthy scent of a civilization learning to count, to remember, to tally the cost of things. And you? You're 1 jug of Cass richer. And 2 goats per, if you're being honest with yourself. Still, not a bad day. Later that afternoon, the clouds begin to gather, not the metaphorical kind, though those exist too when your only tablet says paid, but your goats are mysteriously absent. No, these are literal rain clouds, heavy with desert thunder and the promise of a thoroughly inconvenient downpour. You're standing under a fig tree with 3 villagers who seem far too relaxed about the approaching storm. Only a drizzle, one of them mutters. The fig tree immediately sheds a cold drop right onto your neck. You flinch, and the group collectively laughs in the way only dry people can. But then someone gasps and points to the village square. There, in a panicked huddle, are 5 people clutching damp, crumbling clay tablets. You jog over just in time to see someone shout, "The receipt's gone! The ink's bleeding!" The irony, of course, is that these tablets were created precisely to preserve deals, only they weren't designed to survive Mesopotamian monsoons. Most tablets were sun-dried, not kiln-fired. Tough enough for shelves and sacks, but when the sky cries, they return to mud with all the dignity of a fallen pie. You find a merchant trying to save his best ledger, holding it under a woven mat while dabbing it gently with his sleeve. It's not going well. The marks blur. The edges sag. He looks like someone watching their entire hard drive melt in real time. Historians still debate how much record-keeping was lost to these kinds of disasters. Some tablets were indeed fired for durability, especially legal contracts, temple archives, or tax records destined for eternity. But most were just temporary memory helpers, meant to last weeks, maybe months. Paperwork with an expiration date. And here's the real kicker. In emergencies like this, there wasn't a backup. No cloud storage. No scroll copies. Just squishy regret. A scribe named Etopi appears, eyes wide as he surveys the damage. "This is why I begged for a shelf roof," he mutters, snatching a half-melted account of sheep tithes from a muddy puddle. You hand him one that now reads something close to 20 wet. "Maybe frogs." "Unsalvageable," he sighs, holding it like a fallen comrade. To fix this, the scribe set up an emergency kiosk under a canopy. A potter brings fresh slabs, a fire is stoked for quick-drying clay, and Etopi starts re-recording what he can, by memory and witness testimony. You watch as people queue up, clutching half-mashed tablets and pleading their cases. One man insists his receipt said 7 goats. His neighbor remembers 6. The scribe rolls his eyes and writes down 5. For the sake of peace. You're handed a blank tablet too. Your Cass receipt? Gone to the rain gods. Tiamat the brewer storms up and jabs her finger in your face. "You owe me," she barks. You show her your soggy tunic as proof of shared suffering. She sighs. "Fine. 1 freebie. But next time, wax seal." Wax? Turns out some high-end traders were experimenting with beeswax covers, thin membranes stretched over clay tablets to help resist water. It wasn't common, mostly because bees are rude and wax is expensive, but still, it was a start. A primitive attempt at lamination, if you will. One merchant in town even carved wooden cases for his more important documents, with sliding lids and little compartments. For when your goats are worth remembering, he'd say. But most people relied on luck, quick drying, and yelling loudly when things went wrong. By evening, the clouds retreat, leaving everything smelling like damp earth and barley. The emergency scribe station is still churning out replacement receipts, some based more on vibes than evidence. Edopai wipes his forehead. In the end, he murmurs, all records return to dust. You wonder if he's quoting a proverb or just very tired. You help stack the newly made tablets in the communal archive hut, a mud brick structure with shelves of baked and unbaked clay. Some are carefully labeled. Others? Not so much. One shelf is just labeled, stuff from Narum. Another says, mysteriously, probably taxes? And in the far back, under a woven mat and 3 stones, sits a single tablet, bone dry and firm. You pick it up. The writing is sharp. It reads, 1 goat. Left at gate. No one claimed. Sad eyes. You smile. Because even when the rain falls, and the proof melts, and everyone forgets how many goats anyone actually had, someone took the time to record the goat with sad eyes. And that, you realize, is kind of the whole point. The sun is back the next morning, trying very hard to pretend it never left. The mud is drying fast, cracking into that satisfying pattern that looks like a puzzle you'll never solve. You step carefully around the puddles, still thinking about the soggy receipts from yesterday, and the general fragility of civilization when everything is made out of dirt. You're supposed to meet someone today. A boy named Kiddu who promised, between mouthfuls of barley cake, that he'd teach you how to count goats. The real way. Which, apparently, involves math. Oh no. You find him sitting near the edge of the fields, tracing something into the soil with a stick. He doesn't look up. You're late, he says. A goat already escaped. Then he gestures beside him. Sit. This will hurt your brain, but not your feet. You sit. Kiddu draws a circle in the dirt. This is 60. Then he scratches a wedge inside it. This is 1. Then he draws another wedge, only sideways. This is 10. You stare blankly. So, it's base 10? Kiddu sighs. No. Base 60. You close your eyes briefly. Why? Because, he says, it's better. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians chose base 60 for mathematical elegance, or because it made dividing things like grain easier. 60 is divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, something that came in very handy when dividing offerings, trade goods, or, goats. You watch as Kiddu demonstrates how to count to 59 using just 2 symbols, 1 for 1, and 1 for 10, arranged in clever ways like cuneiform Tetris. The moment it clicks, your brain feels like it just tripped over a rock and discovered fire. You get it? He asks. You nod slowly. Sort of. It's like math with flair. He grins. Exactly. To test your new knowledge, Kiddu hands you a clay tablet and a stylus. You're to record how many goats crossed the field this morning. You sit in the grass, squint, and start counting. 1 goat. 2. 3. Wait, did that 1 double back? Start over. Eventually you reach 15. Or maybe 17. The goats aren't helping. One sneezes directly into your tablet. You mutter something unrepeatable and start again. Kiddu watches with mild amusement. It gets easier. Until you reach 20. After that, it's just sadness. Once you've finally counted and notated the goat parade, he inspects your work. Not bad, he says. Except you wrote 42 instead of 24. You blink. But it was upside down when I wrote it. Then it's your fault for trusting gravity. He shrugs. You sigh. But despite your goat-induced arithmetic woes, the system is brilliant. Using just a few symbols and the magic of base 60, Babylonian scribes could track herds, measure land, calculate interest, and even do rudimentary astronomy. Long before the abacus, long before calculators, there was this math scratched into clay with a stick. Kid tells you about his sister, who's learning to be a temple scribe. She can multiply big numbers in her head. Once, he says proudly, she calculated the barley rations for 70 workers and didn't cry once. You ask if he wants to be a scribe too. He thinks for a while. Maybe. But goats are easier. They don't argue about decimals. You laugh. He doesn't. After a while, you both lie back in the grass, watching the clouds float over the ziggurat in the distance. Kiddu starts listing prime numbers out loud. You start naming the goats based on their vibes. That one? Definitely Kevin. Eventually, a priest's apprentice arrives with a tablet under her arm. The temple's herd needs counting, she says. Bring the scribe trainee. Kiddu bolts upright. You mean me? She nods. The last boy fell asleep in the grain bin. You follow them both toward the temple pens, clay in hand, brains slowly making peace with base 60. And as the goats bleat and jostle and defy your attempts at math-based control, you realize that every number, every count, every wedge, every scratched symbol, is more than just accounting. It's memory. It's trust. It's a system built not just on logic, but on the hope that someone, somewhere, cares whether there were 24 goats or 25. You glance at Kevin. He looks like the kind of goat who'd forge a receipt just for fun. You don't really notice the smell at first. Your attention is on the goats. Again. Always the goats. Kiddu is trying to wrangle a particularly stubborn one into a pen while you're scribbling tallies into a fresh tablet, double-checking the stylus marks before the clay dries and you lose the number 8 entirely to a smudge. Then it hits you, the scent of garlic, sweat, dust, and what can only be described as roasted onion with attitude. You've arrived at the town market. The temple herd is on its way to be traded or counted, or possibly just shown off, depending on who you ask, and you're helping escort them to the open-air bazaar. It sprawls along the river's edge, a mosaic of tents, carts, baskets, and irritated livestock. Bright fabrics flutter in the wind. The soundscape is a lullaby of bartering, laughter, and the occasional threat yelled politely in Sumerian. And the smell? Oh, the smell is vivid. Market mornings are not for the faint of nostril. You squeeze through a crowd of vendors selling dates, dried fish, obsidian amulets, and flatbreads so hot it's practically a weapon. Every merchant, every customer, every wandering scribe has something in their hands: goatskins, spice jars, or those ever-present clay tablets. Some are fresh and soft, wrapped in cloth to prevent damage. Others are sun-fired, cracked at the corners, with neat cuneiform etchings like fingerprints of forgotten promises. This is where receipts come to life. Kidden nudges you and points to an elderly woman sitting behind a small stall of onions and wool. She's got 5 goats tied behind her and a worn clay tablet in front of her, weighted down with a river stone. Watch this, he says. A buyer steps forward, offers 2 fish, and points at a goat. The woman doesn't speak. She picks up the tablet, squints at the scribbles, then nods. She jots a few marks on a fresh piece of clay, presses her seal, a tiny carved duck, into the corner, and hands it over. The fish trader grins, unties a goat, and waddles off as the duck-sealed receipt is tucked into his satchel. You're enchanted. It's not loud or flashy, but it's precise. Efficient. Peaceful. Mostly peaceful. A few stalls down, you spot an argument bubbling over like a too-hot beer pot. A potter and a spice seller are yelling about a miscounted lentil. Exchange. One of them waves a clay receipt above his head like a sword. The other insists it's a forgery. A small crowd gathers. Eventually, a scribe appears, tall, sunburned, with the squint of someone who's resolved 40 disputes this week and hasn't been thanked once. He examines the tablet. Looks at both men. Asks for a witness. A teenage girl steps forward. He traded 6 bundles, she says. Not 5. I remember because I was bored and counted them twice. The scribe nods, updates a new tablet, and hands it to the potter. Resolved, he mutters. Next. Historians still debate how accurate these market records truly were. Some argue they were prone to bias or fudging. Others believe the communal nature of the transactions, multiple witnesses, familiar faces, kept people honest. Or at least mostly honest. You wander past a fish stall where someone has hung their receipts from a wooden pole using twine. Dozens of sun-dried tablets swing gently in the breeze like the world's heaviest wind chimes. In the corner of the market, you find a man making receipts on commission. He doesn't sell anything else, just sits behind a low table with wet clay and styluses, offering to legitimize your goat trades while you wait. His sign is decorated with stylized goats, and the words, "No returns without proof." You can't help but smile. The marketplace, it turns out, is more than a place of commerce. It's a performance of memory. Every sale, every exchange, every goat or fish or woven basket is validated not just by the presence of the item, but by the presence of a tablet, a name, a seal. Even the children get in on it. You spot a small group playing market, one pretending to be the merchant, another the buyer, and a third, solemn as a priest, scratching marks into a lump of clay with a chicken feather. Your role in today's market is mostly observational, but Kitty gives you a task before you leave. Deliver a tablet for him to the barley counter at the far end of the square. "It's simple," he says. "They owe 3 sacks. This proves it." You hold the tablet like it's a newborn. On the way, a stray goat nibbles your robe, and a child throws a date pit at your back. The barley counter doesn't look up when you arrive. "Let me guess," he says. 3 sacks. Kiddo again. He takes the tablet, glances at the seal, and slides 3 bags across the counter with a grunt. As you turn to leave, he mutters, "Tell him next time to fire his receipts. These soft ones won't survive next week's dust storm." You nod solemnly, vowing to pass along the advice, even if you have no idea how to fire clay. As the day fades into the warm hues of evening, the market begins to pack up. Tablets are tucked into bags. Seals are cleaned. Goats, inexplicably, remain exactly where they were. You walk back through the market lanes, surrounded by the low murmur of satisfied traders and the scent of roasted onions on the breeze. You think commerce is chaotic. But receipts? Receipts are a kind of poetry. By now, you've seen receipts work like magic, settling arguments, enabling trade, and preventing goats from being double-sold to unsuspecting fishmongers. But today, you're about to learn what happens when the magic fails. Because today, you lose a receipt. It starts innocently enough. You're walking back from the brewer's stall with a small jar of spiced Cass in one hand and a carefully wrapped tablet in the other. Your payment record for 2 loaves of honey bread purchased on credit. A favor from the baker, who said, "Don't worry, I trust you, just bring the receipt next time." You swore you would. Then, as fate would have it, a goat appears. Not just any goat. Kevin. Yes, that Kevin, the goat with attitude and a suspicious habit of appearing right before something embarrassing happens. He bolts through the alley at full speed, knocking into your leg, sending your drink flying, and your precious clay tablet tumbling into a puddle of discarded date pits and murky water. You fish it out, but it's already softening. The writing blurs. Your name now looks like a cuneiform depiction of sadness. You bring it back to the baker, who inspects the smudge with the same expression you'd expect from someone handed a wet napkin and told it was legal tender. "Sorry," she says, crossing her arms. "No receipt, no bread." You protest. You plead. You explain about Kevin. She raises one eyebrow and simply says, "Then Kevin owes me 2 loaves." Now what? You turn to the street and realize this has happened to others. One man is pacing with an empty hand, claiming he bought a goose last week. A woman insists she paid rent to a scribe's cousin, but the tablet was stolen by a monkey. The monkey, according to rumor, also drinks beer. You've stumbled into one of the great flaws of early accounting. When receipts vanish, trust evaporates. Historians still debate how ancient societies dealt with lost or destroyed records. Some claim there were secondary witnesses, people present during the trade who could vouch for the deal. Others believe temple scribes acted as notaries, recording master copies in official archives, just in case Kevin the goat struck again. So you do what any sensible Babylonian might. You find a witness. Enter Zima, the brewer's niece, age 11, barefoot, and very opinionated. "I saw you pay for the bread," she says between bites of roasted onion. "But only if you give me half your next jar of cass." "A bribe?" "Certainly. But also business." You agree. Together you return to the bakery. Zima explains, in excruciating detail, how she saw you hand over a token, receive 2 loaves, and smile. Like someone who didn't expect the bread to be warm. The baker sighs. "Fine. I'll mark it settled." She pulls out a new tablet, writes your name, correctly this time, and stamps it with her rolling seal, a lion curled around a loaf. You thank her, thank Zima, and breathe deeply, until you realize something. This entire experience just taught you how fragile the system really is. Receipts work only as long as everyone agrees they're valid. You wander past a merchant carving seals into tiny stones. He's chiseling a squirrel today. "New design," he says proudly. "For my cousin. She sells fermented beans." You asked if seal forgery is common. He shrugs. "Only among people with good memory and bad morals. Some scribes countered this risk by requiring multiple witnesses, or by baking certain tablets for permanence. But most people? They relied on reputation, memory, community. And here you are, freshly reminded that while clay can hold truth, it can also melt in your hand the second Kevin makes eye contact. You find Kid near the ziggurat wall, sketching imaginary goat ledgers into the dirt. You tell him the story. He doesn't laugh. Instead, he nods and says, "One time I lost a tablet to a river eel. Just slurped it away." You sit together in silence. The sun is low. The sky burns with sunset. In your pocket, a new receipt. Dry, clear, sealed. You press it gently, just to be sure. And Kevin? He's on a nearby roof. Somehow. It's temple tax day. You can tell because the entire village is moving with the sluggish determination of people walking toward both obligation and possible humiliation. It's like a parade, if parades were silent, dusty, and featured an unusually high number of goats relieving themselves in public. You follow the crowd toward the temple courtyard, where a long table has been set up under a makeshift awning of faded linens and palm fronds. Behind it sit 4 scribes, 3 very stern-looking priests, and 1 goat that seems to be there entirely by accident. This isn't just a day for bringing in owed goods, it's a ritual. A performance. The temple is both the heart of the city and the belly of its bureaucracy, and today, it opens wide. You carry a clay tablet under your arm, your own proof of a prior delivery, 1 jar of sesame oil and half a bushel of lentils. You practice saying, "Paid in full," in a confident voice. It comes out more like, "Probably handled it," but you're committed. First in line, a flax merchant with a beard like a broom. He's brought 6 bundles and a sour attitude. He presents his receipt, the scribe verifies it, the priest murmurs a blessing, and it's over in seconds. The merchant grumbles anyway. Next, a potter offering bulls and a sheep. He forgot his receipt. The priest frowns. A goat bleats judgmentally. Then it's your turn. You step forward, hand over your tablet, and try to look innocent. The scribe takes it, peers at the markings, tilts it sideways, and then, without looking up, says, "Did you write this yourself?" You freeze. No. Well, kind of. Because it says here you delivered 1 sesame jar plus half a lentil goat. A pause. You glance at the tablet, and yes, it does look like that. The priest leans forward. "We do not accept lentil goats." You try to explain, stammer something about hasty writing and stylus slippage, but they're already shaking their heads. The priest waves for the next person. You're shuffled to the side with the others in the unclear status pile. This is where you learn the real power behind temple taxes, not the goods themselves, but the documentation. See, while some people show up with baskets and barrels, others arrive empty-handed, just tablets in hand, proving that their debts were already fulfilled. Some of these receipts are tiny. Some are elaborate. One is tucked into a goat's harness, which seems risky but also adorable. You watch as the scribes handle each case with eerie efficiency. Cross-checking seals, scanning marks, glancing at centralized ledgers carved into larger clay slabs stacked nearby like sleepy stone pancakes. These ledgers are master copies, updated weekly, protected from theft and weather, and triple-checked by priestly assistants with very bad posture. Historians still argue whether these centralized ledgers were always accurate. Some believe scribes could be bribed. Others claim temple. Archives were the most trustworthy records in Mesopotamia, better kept than personal memory and more reliable than oral testimony. Today, it feels like both. You notice a woman in a deep blue sash arguing gently over a missing donation. "I gave 2 baskets of millet," she insists. "Ask the gatekeeper, he saw me." The gatekeeper nods. The scribe listens, nods once, then quietly creates a new tablet to reflect the transaction. There's flexibility here. A recognition that truth isn't always written, it's also witnessed. Eventually, a younger priest returns with your tablet, slightly modified. "We've updated the entry," he says. "It now says you delivered a jar of sesame oil and half a bushel of lentils." He pauses. "And that you owe us 1 drawing of a goat, for entertainment purposes." You blink. What?" He shrugs. "Standard punishment for confusing cuneiform. We hang them in the temple archive." You're handed a fresh clay tablet and a stylus. You draw the worst goat in the history of goats. It looks like a duck wearing horns. The priest studies it, says, "Passable," and waves you through. You're in. As you walk away, receipt now correctly filed and your dignity limping a little behind you, you hear 2 scribes whispering. One says, "We should make everyone draw their goats. It would make the taxes more fun." The other replies, "Only if we get to rank them." Later that evening, you sneak back to the archive, curious to see where your goat duck went. You find it hung proudly between 2 larger tablets, one listing 3,000 bricks delivered to the temple's north wall, and the other a complaint about excessive honey bees near altar. Your goat drawing? Labeled simply, "Taxpayer error no. 37. You smile. Because even here, in the solemn clay halls of divine bookkeeping, there's room for a little chaos. And a lot of goats. You're woken up by shouting. Not the aggressive kind, more like the excited, slightly smug kind. The kind that says, "I caught someone doing something dumb, and I can't wait to tell everybody." You step out into the dusty courtyard just in time to see a crowd forming near the goat pens. At the center is a woman standing on an overturned basket, holding up a broken clay tablet like it's the jawbone of a fraudster. Her voice is clear, unwavering, and sharp enough to slice barley. "I told him," she says. "You do not mess with someone who keeps her receipts alphabetized by goat name." Her name is Ashaya, and she's a widow, a weaver, and, if today's spectacle is anything to go by, an absolute legend. You shuffle closer through the crowd, past murmurs of, "Oh no, not again," and, "Is this about the white goat or the lame one?" Turns out, someone tried to sell her back her own goat. Let that sink in. A man from a neighboring village showed up with a goat he claimed was his. Same markings, same wonky leg, same inexplicable preference for melon rinds. But Ashaya? She keeps detailed records. Not only does she have a receipt, she has 2, one from the original sale, and one from a temple priest confirming a tithe exemption for one elderly nanny goat, partial blindness, name, Onion. Yes. Onion. Ashaya lifts her tablet for all to see. Onion was mine. Onion is mine. And Onion wouldn't even look at him. She gestures dramatically to the goat in question, who, at that moment, relieves itself on the man's sandal. Case closed. The would-be thief mumbles something about mistaken identity and goats looking similar, but the crowd isn't buying it. A scribe steps forward, confirms Ashaya's tablets, checks the seal, and nods. She's right. The man is escorted out, barefoot and goatless. You're impressed. Not just with her memory or her attitude, but with how powerful those little clay slabs suddenly feel. Ashaya waves you over. "You're the one who drew the duck goat, right?" she asks, smiling. You nod, blushing slightly. She hands you a warm flatbread. "For entertainment. And for understanding the importance of paperwork." You sit beside her, sharing the bread while she explains her system. "I make a tablet every time I trade. I bake the important ones. And I keep them in baskets organized by season, sealed with a fish spine. You know, spring oats, autumn grain, that kind of thing." You ask how she remembers so much. She shrugs. "Because men lie. Clay doesn't." That might be the most Babylonian thing anyone's ever said. Historians still debate how involved women were in the Babylonian economy. While many records focus on temple transactions and male scribes, surviving tablets show women were active traders, landowners, and, in Ashaya's case, absolute masters of petty justice. You ask if she's ever lost a tablet. "Once," she says. "Flood took it. But I had a backup." She reaches into a pouch and pulls out a smaller tablet wrapped in cloth. "I write the same transaction twice. One for them, one for me. Double-entry bookkeeping. In 2200 BC. You glance at Onion, who's munching serenely on a melon rind. Justice has been served. Ashaya stands, stretches her back, and says, "Come by my stall sometime. I'll show you how to label your ledgers properly. You're still writing goat like it means jar. It's embarrassing." You promise you will. As the crowd disperses, you notice something wonderful. Other villagers are digging into their clay pouches, rechecking their seals, whispering about maybe baking their receipts just in case. Ashaya may have stopped a scammer, but she also reminded everyone how fragile trust can be, and how strong proof really is. You return to your own satchel, reach in, and feel your tablet, the one with your sesame oil delivery, now properly edited and goat-free. It's still whole. Still yours. And suddenly it feels like the most valuable thing you own. It's late, but not quiet. The village is lit by a scatter of oil lamps and flickering torches, casting goat-shaped shadows against mud brick walls. Somewhere near the temple, a flute plays a tune that sounds vaguely like a lullaby and vaguely like someone stepped on a cat. You're standing just outside the small brick structure that serves as the night court. Yes, night court, because apparently, some disputes just can't wait until morning. Inside, the air is warm and heavy with the smell of reed mats, lamp oil, and the faint panic of someone trying to remember what they wrote on a tablet a month ago. You're not just observing tonight. You've been invited to witness a hearing. The matter? Goats. Again. Two men sit across from each other on opposite sides of a low table. One is a merchant named Ishtaru, with finely stitched robes and a scowl that could curdle milk. The other is Nabu, a herder who smells like honest work and very old cheese. The issue, 3 goats allegedly delivered as temple tithe, have vanished. Ishtaru insists he dropped them off 2 nights ago, just before dusk. Nabu claims they never arrived. Somewhere between the temple gate and the goat pen, the livestock vanished, along with the receipt. There's no way to know who's lying. Or is there? The presiding judge is a gray-bearded priest named Ilugamar. His eyebrows have their own weather system. He holds the temple's master ledger like it's a newborn child and gestures for silence. First, he examines the tablet Ishtaru presents, soft clay, no seal. Ilugamar frowns. "Why not baked?" "I was in a rush," Ishtaru mutters. "It was dusk. The oven was full of fish, apparently." Then he asks Nabu if there are any witnesses. Nabu points to his own goat, standing proudly outside the door with a strip of linen tied around its neck. "That goat saw everything." The judge does not dignify that. Instead, he calls in a junior scribe to check the gatekeeper's log. After a few minutes of frantic flipping and whispered cursing, the scribe shakes his head. "No entry for 3 goats. But there's an entry for 2 jugs of cast delivered by Ishtaru around that time." The crowd murmurs. Ishtaru swallows visibly. You lean toward Kiddu, who's sitting beside you with a stolen fig in each pocket. "Wait," you whisper. Did he trade the goats for beer? Looks like it. Kiddo grins. Classic Ishtaru. But here's where it gets tricky. The temple's ledgers show no goats. The cast delivery is real. But without a matching goat receipt, baked, sealed, or otherwise, there's no proof the animals ever went where Ishtaru claims. Historians still argue whether these kinds of disputes were usually resolved through strict evidence, or the more wobbly, community reputation, method. Tonight, it's a little of both. Elugamar asks for a final word from each man. Ishtaru insists, again, that the goats were delivered. The receipt was wet. I didn't think it needed baking, he adds. The cast was a separate delivery. Naba shrugs. No goats showed up. I don't know where they went. Maybe the beer drank them. A fair point. The judge leans back and says, Very well. This court finds the lack of a sealed or witness receipt unacceptable. The delivery cannot be verified. Therefore, Ishtaru holds his breath. You will deliver 3 goats again, this time by daylight. And bake your tablet. Or, he adds, eyes narrowing, don't bother showing up. The crowd exhales as one. Ishtaru nods stiffly, bows low, and stomps off. You feel relieved. Not because someone won, but because truth, however slippery, found footing in the system. As the room clears out, Elugamar waves you over. You learn anything tonight? He asks, wiping clay dust from his fingers. You nod. That goats are a liability. And wet receipts don't count. He chuckles. Close enough. He picks up the disputed tablet, now smudged and sagging, and tosses it into a jar labeled Disputed. Probably lies. It clinks softly against others. You leave night court with Kiddo under a sky as black as ink. Stars blink above the ziggurat. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, a goat farts philosophically. Want to grab a late barley cake? Kid asks. You nod. And as you bite into something crunchy and possibly not intentional, you think about how fragile trust can be, and how one small piece of clay, if cared for properly, can stand up against even the slipperiest goat tail. You rise the next morning feeling oddly energized. Maybe it's the cool breeze rolling off the river, or maybe it's the satisfaction of watching a smug merchant get roasted in night court. Either way, there's work to be done. Today, you're tasked with something both prestigious and mind-numbing, performing a goat inventory audit at the temple. It's not glamorous, says Kiddo, handing you a stylus and a clean clay tablet. But it's important. And also hilarious, depending on how many goats bite you. The temple herd lives behind the ziggurat in a walled enclosure that smells like every bad decision ever made by livestock. There's hay, there's dust, and there are over 60 goats, all of whom seem personally committed to resisting bureaucracy. You're greeted by Tamtu, a temple aide with 2 missing fingers and an expression that says, I used to like goats. Here's the master receipt, she says, handing you a thick, sun-dried tablet covered in cuneiform. Every goat that's supposed to be in this pen is listed here. Description, age, donation source, horn status, and mood, roughly. You blink. Mood? She points. That one's listed as sullen. You'll know her when you see her. You begin the audit. The process is exactly what it sounds like. You count the goats, match them to the descriptions on the master tablet, and mark off each one as present missing, or angrily climbing something. First up, 1 white male, chipped horn, gifted by fishmonger Tumman, age 4, mood curious. Found him. He's trying to eat your sandal. Next, 2 black females, twin sisters, donated during spring festival, extremely bitey. You find them chewing through the reed fence. One of them tries to bite your tablet. You note. Present, hostile. You and Kiddo work your way down the list, pausing frequently to dodge hooves or reread faded marks. The goats are not cooperative. One fakes a limp to avoid being counted twice. Another follows you like a guilty conscience. A third simply refuses to make eye contact. Tamta keeps watch, occasionally yelling things like, "That one's not ours!" or, "Don't fall for the old switcheroo." They do this every week. You begin to appreciate just how complex livestock accounting truly is. Historians still argue whether these audits were ceremonial or truly enforced. Some suggest they were part of temple ritual, making sure the gods got their proper goat allotment. Others think it was practical, ensuring no goat napping occurred under priestly noses. Either way, it's hard work. You reach the halfway point and discover a discrepancy. Goat number 37 is supposed to be gray, male, extremely round, donated by a shia named Demuzi. But goat number 37 is missing. In his place is a scrawny beige impostor with one eye and the posture of someone who's made a lot of bad choices. Tamta frowns. That's not Demuzi. You agree. That's not Muzi. She chuckles. Write it down. One Demuzi missing. Possible impersonation. As the list dwindles, your tablet fills with notes. One ear missing, very anxious, unreasonably slippery. And your favorite. Licking the tablet, possibly literate. You finish the count, and Tamta double-checks your tally against the master record. Only 2 missing, she says. Better than last week. She collects your tablet, inspects it, and nods approvingly. You've got potential. Want to do the sheep next? You shake your head so hard your stylus falls out of your belt. As a reward, Tamta gives you a small baked tablet with your name and the phrase, Auditor for the temple herd. It's oddly touching. And heavy. You slip it into your pouch, feeling a little taller. As you leave the pen, you hear Kidda muttering. That one definitely faked a limp. And one of the Baidi twins watches you with narrowed eyes, plotting. You walk home dusty, tired, and deeply aware that you've just participated in one of the oldest professions humanity ever developed, verifying that nobody lied about goats. And even now, in the modern world, that basic truth holds. Trust is good, but verification? Well, verification has horns. You think, perhaps, the hardest part of goat-based accounting is behind you. You've survived temple audits, melted receipts, and the biting twins. Surely the rest of your Mesopotamian journey will be peaceful and dry. And then someone hands you a fig cake and says, You're invited to a contract signing. You raise an eyebrow. Is it about goats? They nod. And land. And marriage. And snacks. You take the cake and follow. The gathering is set in a shaded courtyard framed by pomegranate trees and sleepy-looking cousins. Clay stools are arranged in a semicircle. In the middle sits a low table, 3 scribes, and a bride who looks more excited about the sheep dowry than the groom. This is not a wedding, this is a record-keeping event masquerading as a social gathering. Everyone here is either a relative, a witness, or a goat. The scribe presiding over the signing is a man named Shubalilu, with an elegant seal and the slow, deliberate pace of someone who will stop the ceremony if anyone sneezes on the tablet. The contract, as he explains between bites of salted cucumber, is a 3-part agreement. The groom receives 5 goats, 2 chickens, and rights to a field near the canal. The bride receives legal control over one of the goats. The one with the pretty ears. In the event of separation, all clay tablets must be returned to the bride's mother, in a condition unmarred by rodents or moisture. You nearly choke on your fig cake. The groom nods solemnly. The bride signs first, pressing her seal into the fresh clay with care. Her seal depicts a lion eating a star. You don't ask. The groom follows. His seal is less memorable. A wavy line and something that might be a dog. He seems embarrassed. Then it's your turn, as a witness. You're handed a stylus and told to make your mark. You hesitate. Do I need a seal? No, says Shubalila. Just don't draw another goat. We're trying to be serious. You scratch a quick spiral next to the others. It looks a bit like a snail having a bad day, but it counts. Historians believe these witness contracts formed the backbone of Mesopotamian law. Even when courts weren't involved, agreements could be enforced if they had enough witness marks and snacks. Witnesses lent credibility, but also memory. If someone tried to deny a deal later, you'd have 10 people ready to say, I was there. I had a fig cake. You definitely agreed to goat number 4. After the signatures come the snacks. Dates, dried fish, sesame cakes, and warm beer in ceramic mugs. You sit beside Kiddu, who's already on his second helping of lentil stew. He gestures at the signed tablet, now drying in the sun beside a stack of rushes. Someday, he says, someone will dig that up and think, wow, these people really like goats. You glance at the tablet. He's not wrong. As the party continues, people swap stories about other memorable signings. The merchant who used a fish as a seal, the priest who signed a marriage contract then fainted from heatstroke, the boy who signed his dog's name on a property deal and got away with it for 3 years. You ask why the contracts are so detailed. Shibalala leans over and says, because if it's not written, it didn't happen. He points to an older woman shuffling by. She's here today because someone once forgot to record her cow delivery. Took her 2 years and a rice bribe to clear it up. Now she keeps every receipt in a clay jar under her bed. Won't sleep without it. As the sun sets, the signed tablet is carefully baked in a communal kiln, a small fire pit lined with smooth stones and the lingering scent of yesterday's fish stew. You help carry it, watching as it joins a row of still-warm contracts, all bearing the marks of seals, scribes, and snack-stained fingers. Later, as the stars blink awake and the laughter fades, you realize this ceremony was more than a formality. It was community. Each mark on that tablet wasn't just proof. It was memory. And in a world without cameras or courts or cloud backups, memory, when shared, sealed, and properly dried, is everything. The morning sun rises over the river, painting the mud brick walls in soft gold, and you're already halfway through your second bowl of barley mash when someone bursts into the courtyard shouting, "Caravans in!" You wipe your hands and squint toward the city gate, where dust is rising in long, lazy swirls. A caravan has arrived, traders from the west, the east, possibly even from Elam or Mari. It's the closest thing to a festival the village sees that doesn't involve sacrificial bread. You're recruited, perhaps too eagerly, to help with unloading and receipt observation, which, loosely translated, means follow the grown-ups, write stuff down, and try not to get run over by a donkey. The caravan is a beautiful mess. Donkeys laden with baskets of lapis lazuli, woven cloths in faded pinks and greens, sacks of fragrant spices, and because it's always goats. Some have decorative braids in their fur. One is wearing what might be earrings. The lead trader is a broad-shouldered man named Pazuzu, who greets everyone with the enthusiasm of a man who has spent the last 2 weeks eating dried figs and listening to his cousin sing about barley. He carries a small chest filled with clay tablets, all stamped and sealed. Receipts, he explains. Every stop, every sack, every goat. Want to see? You do. The tablets are beautiful, fine-grained clay, neatly inscribed, and bearing seals that seem foreign. Swirling patterns, bird shapes, a circle with 6 dots. These, Pazuzu says proudly, are from Susa. They like symmetry. You notice something interesting. The receipts aren't just about deliveries. Some mention the weather, road conditions, illnesses, and in one case, one goat possessed by a demon, left behind. You raise an eyebrow. Pazuzu shrugs. Could have been a metaphor. Historians still argue whether these travel records served strictly transactional purposes or whether they also acted as journals, offering a glimpse into the slow chaos of Mesopotamian trade routes. Judging by the demon goat, the answer might be both. You're given your own slab of clay and assigned to inventory the goods as they're unloaded. You do your best. 4 baskets of dried fish. 6 bolts of linen. 3 goats, ornamental, possibly dramatic. 1 jar labeled, "Not vinegar, do not sniff." Kidda leans over and adds, "Too late." Once the goods are accounted for, the scribes gather. This part is sacred. Each trade, each exchange, must be recorded, verified, and sealed. Pazuzu offers 5 bolts of cloth in exchange for 30 amphorae of sesame oil. The scribe calculates the value. Agreed, he nods. Then comes the performance. 2 fresh tablets are pressed. One for Pazuzu, one for the temple's record. The terms are written. 2 witnesses, yourself and an elderly woman named Nilil who smells like onions and wisdom, make their marks. Then the seals are rolled across the clay, 1 spiral, you, 1 onion sprout, her, 1 pigeon with a scroll in its beak, the temple, and 1 6-dotted sunburst, Pazuzu. It's a thing of beauty. Pazuzu beams. That's how you trade with class. Not all caravan trades are smooth. At a neighboring table, 2 younger traders are bickering over whether they delivered the right honey. This is fig honey, one says. It was supposed to be date. The scribe shrugs. That's between you and your bees. Eventually, the goods are settled, receipts baked, and new friendships forged. You watch as children chase each other around the donkeys, laughing, while traders unwrap. Small gifts, perfume beads, polished stones, a turtle carved from bone. One trader tells stories of a mountain pass where wolves howl like flutes. Another describes a city where people write on cloth instead of clay. You lean in closer. How do they preserve it? He shrugs. No idea. I dropped mine in a puddle and it became soup. The day ends with a communal meal, lentil stew, bread, and roasted river fish. Someone produces a lyre and sings a song about a goat that got promoted to temple guard. It's not clear if this really happened. As you stretch out on the cool ground, belly full, tablet pouch heavier, you think about what you've witnessed. Trade isn't just about goods. It's about promises, stories, journeys, and the way those things are captured, not just in clay, but in memory. And in a world without email or barcodes, a well-written receipt? It's your passport, your alibi, your story. The next morning begins with a strange hush. Not the peaceful kind. The nervous kind, the sort that ripples through the market stalls like a whisper with weight. You step outside and immediately catch snippets of tense conversation. The count was off. Someone mutters. Not again, sighs another. A third simply says, they're bringing the soldiers. You follow the murmurs to the edge of the administrative quarter, where a growing crowd gathers near the city granary. Beside its thick clay wall stands a contingent of temple guards. Not quite warriors, more like very large men who look like they've been waiting all week for someone to steal lentils just so they can get involved. And at the center of it all is a tablet. Not just any tablet, a tax receipt tablet. You inch closer. The issue? A delivery of 20 goats, recorded, sealed, and stored, is now 30 goats short. Yes. Somehow, 10 goats less than 0. Kidda stands beside you, wide-eyed. That's not a miscount, he whispers. That's a goat-shaped declaration of war. Turns out, the goats were meant as a tribute to the nearby city-state of Lagash. Delivered 2 weeks ago, confirmed by both merchant and temple scribe. But when Lagash unsealed the delivery tablet and checked the pen, 10 goats missing. No hoof prints. No explanation. Now word has arrived, Lagash thinks Uruk is trying to cheat them. And just like that, you've stumbled into one of history's first known inter-city account disputes. The kind that could, and sometimes did, lead to military conflict. Historians still debate how often bookkeeping errors were used as excuses for war. But in a world built on clay records, miscounts could carry the weight of betrayal. A nervous priest steps forward, holding a copy of the disputed tablet. It bears the seal of the delivery scribe, now conspicuously absent. We must audit, he says gravely. From the start. So you, Kidu, and a small group of scribes and guards retrace the original trade, following the paper trail, or rather, the clay trail. First stop, the merchant's home. He swears he delivered 20. Counted them myself, he says. Used the good stylus. But his own receipt is cracked, possibly tampered with. The seal's edge is smeared. Someone may have tried to reroll it. Next, the goat pen. The temple clerk who signed the goats in has conveniently taken a sudden sabbatical to visit an aunt in Nippur. Suspicious. You sift through backup tablets, old ledgers, and witness notes. Some mention the delivery. One references a confusing goat incident. Another simply says, don't trust the short one with the sandals. Kid pauses. What if the goats were stolen between the cities? Then someone forged the receipt, you say. Or hid the theft under real seals. That's the terrifying part. The receipt looked real. You visit the clay archive vault. There, in a dark, cool room filled with shelves of baked tablets, a priest brings out the master copy of the original transaction. It matches the version Lagash received. 20 goats. Verified. Sealed. Only one thing is different, the witness mark. Yours. Your little spiral swirl, made in the shadow of the ziggurat, pressed into the corner with sleepy confidence and sticky fig residue. You gulp. They think you saw the goats, the priest says, studying you carefully. You rack your memory. The day of the signing, the goats were penned, restless, loud, a cloud of fur and hooves. You assumed someone had counted them. You certainly didn't. I was just the witness. You mumble. Then you'll be the re-witness, the priest declares. Come. You're brought to the edge of the pen where the replacement goats, now sourced hastily from various corners of the city, are being gathered for redelivery. But this time you count. Out loud. One by one. With 3 scribes, 2 guards, and a goat who keeps trying to nibble your sleeve. By the end you're hoarse, exhausted, and absolutely certain of one thing. There are 20 goats. This time, sealed and recorded after the count. You press your mark, more careful now. The seal of the temple joins. Yours. The tablet is baked immediately, guarded like treasure. No one wants Goat War 2. That evening, you sit in the shade beside the ziggurat steps, clay dust still in your eyebrows, watching the last of the sun fall across the reeds. Kidda hands you a honey beer and says, "We may have just prevented a war." You nod, too tired to smile. He adds, "But if another goat goes missing, I'm joining the fishmongers." And in that moment, as the breeze stirs and the goats begin their nightly concert of bleats and grumbles, you realize something deeper. The balance of cities, alliances, and peace can rest, not on kings or armies, but on clay, on trust, and on you actually double-checking the goat count. 2 days after narrowly averting goat-fueled geopolitical chaos, you're granted a brief respite from hoof-counting duty. A temple scribe named Lugilmesh offers you a new assignment that's equally important and slightly more stationary: organizing a merchant's year-end ledger. You accept. Partly because your sandals are disintegrating. Partly because this particular merchant, Ereshin, has a reputation for both wealth and chaos. Her ledger tablets are stored in a one-room office behind her stall in the northern bazaar, under 3 woven mats, a pile of sheep wool, and inexplicably, a very sleepy chicken. You enter and immediately understand why you were chosen. It's a disaster. Clay tablets are everywhere. Some are neatly stacked. Most aren't. One pile is held together by a string made of braided date skins. Another is resting on a basket labeled barley that may or may not be owed. Ereshim claps her hands. "I'd organize it myself," she says, "but my system is too advanced for regular scribes." You squint at a tablet with a drawing of what might be a sad fish and the phrase, "Do not trade with him." Advanced, indeed. Your job? Sort, summarize, and make a master ledger of every trade she's conducted over the past year. It's the closest thing ancient Babylon has to a spreadsheet, and you've just been hired as its first unpaid intern. You begin. The tablets reveal everything. Goat swaps. 2 large females for 4 baskets of dried figs, bit me anyway. Beer exchanges. Loan cast to Potter, interest paid in shouting. Fabric trades gone wrong. Tried to pass off camel wool as sheep wool. I was not fooled. 1 odd entry. Delivered 6 geese. Received 5 geese and 1 suspicious goose. There's humor in her records, yes, but also a kind of living memory. Each tablet has its own tone. Some are formal. Some are frantic. A few look like they were written mid-argument, with marks pressed harder than necessary and stylus pokes you can feel through time. You start arranging them by month. Ereshin insists on categories like high sun goat deals and that dusty week with the pottery fair. Kiddu shows up mid-morning to help. He immediately finds a section labeled, "Debts from men I shouldn't have lent to," and laughs so hard he drops his stylus into a pot of ink. "Who's Zema?" he asks, holding up a tablet with only one phrase. "Zemu, never again." Ereshkian sighs. "He traded me a goat with a fake beard once. I'm still not over it." By mid-afternoon, you've managed to sort most of the transactions into 5 neat piles, each with an updated clay tablet summarizing totals. Goats in, 42. Goats out, 39. Beer received, 21 jars. Beer lost to evaporation/theft, unclear. Debts forgiven, 3. Debts pretended forgiven, 6. You also find her doodles. Tiny clay sketches in the margins, goats wearing hats, angry scribes, a wheel with legs. They help me focus. She shrugs. Historians still debate whether ancient ledgers were always this detailed, or this emotional. Some argue scribes were purely bureaucratic. Others point to free-form ledgers like Ereshkian's as proof that even the most structured systems had room for personality, pettiness, and doodled vengeance. Finally, you begin transcribing the master ledger, a clean, neatly inscribed tablet listing each trade, organized by moon cycle, and complete with Ereshkian's personal seal, a monkey holding a scroll. You make a second copy, just in case. Ereshkian insists on baking them both. "Never again," she says, "will my empire rest on the edge of a soggy tablet." You finish just before sunset. The room smells like dust and triumph. You stand over the finished stack of records, now dried and marked with colored thread. "Do I get paid?" you ask. Ereshkian hands you a warm barley cake and a hug. "In this economy? You get snacks and my eternal respect." Fair enough. That night, as you carry your slightly oily barley cake back home, you feel something shift. You've not just counted goats. You've counted years. And somehow, through all the scribbles and sass and stylus slips, you've helped preserve something precious. A life, written in clay. You'd think, after organizing a year's worth of goat transactions and receiving a barley cake as compensation, your life might quiet down. But no. Because that night, just after the oil lamps are lit, and the streets have gone soft with shadows, Kidder grabs your arm and whispers, "You want to hear something really ridiculous?" You already know you do. "There was a goat heist," he says, eyes wide. "And it's so dumb, it might have actually worked." The words, goat, and heist, together should never inspire confidence, and yet you're already halfway to the market square before you ask a single question. Kidder tells you the basics. 3 nights ago, under cover of a festival distraction, someone attempted to steal 20 goats from the temple pens. Not all at once, mind you. In disguises. Disguises? You blink. He nods. They dressed as scribes. You stop walking. So they walked in with tablets and just walked out with goats. Worse, he says. They showed a fake receipt. You arrive at the temple gate and duck behind a stack of bricks just in time to see a scribe reenacting the event with increasing levels of theatrical disdain. Apparently, the heist went like this. The culprits forged a clay tablet, complete with seal, claiming to authorize the relocation of 20 goats to a new pen outside the city. They arrived just after sunset in official-looking robes, led by a man who claimed to be Senior Scribe Balatu, a real person, who was, unfortunately, 3 cities away delivering barley. They spoke confidently, used the right terminology, and, here's the kicker, brought 2 actual goats with them to make it look like a delivery in reverse. The gatekeeper, a man who had just eaten far too much onion stew, didn't think to question it. He let them in. They got away with 12 goats before someone noticed the receipt looked squishy, says the reenacting scribe. You snort. Apparently, the forgery was made with underbaked clay. Soft. Smudgeable. The seal had been pressed too deep, obvious to anyone who'd handled tablets more than twice. One touch and the characters squished like overcooked lentils. Now the temple is on high alert. Goat counts are being tripled. Seal verifications must be witnessed by 2 scribes. and every entry into the pen is recorded not just on tablet, but with a drawing of the person's face. Badly done, of course, Kidda says. No one here can draw. But here's the real kicker. No one knows who pulled it off. The perpetrators vanished. Disguises ditched. Goats scattered into various districts. Historians speculate that fraud in ancient Mesopotamia may have been more common than previously thought, especially as systems grew more complex and layered. For every honest scribe like Ninurtisin, there was a clever merchant with a cousin who could mimic a seal using a wet walnut shell. You sit with Kidda by the temple wall, giggling like children. Want to hear the best part? He asks. You nod, already wheezing. One of the stolen goats came back. It just returned. 3 nights later. Walked into the pen by itself like it forgot it was stolen. No one's sure if it escaped or if someone felt guilty, Kid adds. But they recorded its return on a tablet. He holds it up. It reads, Goat number 17, presumed stolen, now returned. Slight limp. Eyes filled with mystery. You fall backward laughing. Later that night, the high scribe makes an announcement. To prevent future scams, all receipts must be baked within 1 hour of creation. No exceptions. Temple guards will be trained to spot soft clay. And all goat transactions must be witnessed by at least one person who can identify a seal by taste. You hope that last part was a joke. As you head home under the rising moon, you glance at your own small tablet pouch. It's heavier now, 6 receipts, 1 for lentils, 1 for barley, 1 for emergency beer, and 1 simply labeled possible goat sighting, unverified. You feel a strange pride. These little chunks of clay, scratched and stamped, aren't just about proving things. They're about belonging. To a system, to a community, to a world where a goat can be stolen, recovered, recorded, and joked about over flatbread. And where history isn't written in ink or stone, but in quiet clay. You wake up the next morning to find a traveler from Elam standing in the middle of the village square, waving a piece of seashell? Is this your receipt? He asks loudly, holding up what looks like a smooth shell etched with faint, unfamiliar symbols. The crowd gathers. A temple scribe examines it with a squint. That's not ours, he says. That's coastal? The traveler nods. I'm from the shore. We don't use clay. Too wet. Shells don't melt in the rain. You blink. You've spent weeks learning to press, dry, fire, and seal clay tablets like your life depends on it, and now some stranger shows up with a seashell claiming it's better? The traveler's name is Ira. He's tall, sun-darkened, and seems both tired and amused. Where I come from, he explains, we carve receipts into shell, bone, or wood. Light. Durable. If it cracks, you've really earned it. The scribes are scandalized. How do you seal them? Asks Ninurtisin aghast. Ira shrugs. With knots, colored string, and memory. You are, frankly, intrigued. So is Kiddu, who immediately offers to trade a clay goat token for one of Ira's shells. Ira agrees, but only if Kiddu teaches him how to roll a seal properly. You spend the afternoon watching a clumsy cultural exchange unfold in front of the brewer's stall. Ira demonstrates how he threads tiny shells onto woven cords, each pattern representing an agreement, trade, repayment, partnership. He shows how one particular seashell, when notched twice, means promise fulfilled. Another, with a small burn mark, means pending grain delivery. No clay. No styluses. No angry goats attempting to eat your contract. Historians still puzzle over the vast variety of ancient record-keeping systems. While Mesopotamia standardized clay cuneiform, neighboring regions developed their own methods. Some carved on palm bark, others painted on cloth or used bead codes. It wasn't until trade expanded that people realized, not everyone speaks the same language of proof. You see this firsthand when Ira tries to trade with a spice vendor. He offers 5 shells strung together with green twine. The vendor frowns. What's that supposed to mean? Ira sighs. It says I gave 5 bushels of dates last month, The vendor shakes his head. I don't read twine. Eventually, they call over you, yes, you, to help translate the receipt. You attempt to mimic Ira's explanation in scribe speak. This knot here means month of cool winds, and this notch means the agreement was verbal but witnessed by his cousin. Who's his cousin? The vendor asks. Ira points to a man leaning against a date palm, chewing bark. Trustworthy, he adds. The deal falls through. But a conversation starts. By dusk, a small group of scribes are gathered in a circle, comparing writing surfaces. One brings out a wax tablet prototype, soft, reusable, weirdly fragrant. Another shows off a bit of parchment from a recent trip west. Ira, in turn, teaches a group of children how to string tokens together into a makeshift receipt necklace. One child immediately loses it in a puddle. You sit with Ninurtasin, watching the gathering. It's messy, he admits. But maybe that's the point. You nod. Proof is only proof if both sides believe it. He raises a brow. You're getting philosophical. You smile. Must be the sea air on that shell. Later that evening, Ira approaches with a gift, a small, flat shell with your name scratched across it. Well, a rough approximation, and a knot of yellow twine. Proof, he says, that we talked. That you listened. You're unexpectedly touched. You slip it into your tablet pouch, nestled among clay and dust, a reminder that receipts come in many forms, baked, carved, tied, or simply remembered. And for every goat you count, there's a traveler somewhere counting fish, shells, or stars. Different materials. Same message. I was here. I gave this. I remember. You're in the scribe quarters, hunched over a tablet, trying to spell lentil without accidentally writing curse potato when the door slams open. It's a delivery boy from the Merchants Guild, out of breath and carrying a clay slab the size of your torso. It's from Enlil's office. He gasps. And it's a mess. He's not wrong. The tablet is dense with text, dozens of trade entries, multiple hands, and enough crossouts to suggest at least 3 minor arguments and 1 full-blown accounting brawl. You read the top line. Revised record of goat for silver exchanges, mid-spring to early summer. Kidda leans over your shoulder. Looks like they tried to cram 10 tablets into one. You sigh. Time for some bureaucratic spelunking. Your task? Simplify the chaos. First, you spread out your tools, styluses of different thickness, a sponge for smoothing clay, and your new shell twine receipt from Ira for luck. You begin decoding the ledger. The entries come in waves. 3 goats traded for 12 shekels, 2 delivered, 1 pending hoof repair. Correction, same goat sold twice. Resolved by shared custody, alternate feast days. Goat promised as wedding dowry retrieved after bride absconded with potter. Temple goat gifted to brewer as sign of goodwill. Goat returned after incident in fermentation vat. By midday, your hands ache and you've invented 4 new shorthand symbols, including one that means, this was probably a bribe. Ninurtasin appears with a jar of fig paste and a look of pure judgment. Why aren't you segmenting by trade type? I tried, you say, gesturing to a pile of crumbled rewrites. But half of these use local slang. What's a sky goat? He thinks for a moment. Either a very arrogant animal or a dead metaphor. Context is key. You decide to group the entries by intent rather than item, tribute, personal trade, restitution, ceremonial exchange, and miscellaneous goat-related case. As the cleaned up ledger begins to take form, something becomes clear. This isn't just a record of exchanges, it's a record of relationships. Who trusted whom? Who defaulted, once or 3 times? Who lent generously? Who demanded witnesses, and who always undercounted on purpose? Historians still debate how early bureaucracies balanced the mechanical with the personal. Some see ancient ledgers as cold, transactional documents. But more and more scholars suggest they were relational maps, preserving not just numbers, but nuance. Kidda finds a cluster of entries detailing a series of goat trades between 2 families. Over 5 years, They exchange animals, grain, labor, even gossip scribbled in margins. One line simply reads, "Gave her the white goat because she cried." You pause. Because here, amid dry arithmetic, is something astonishing: emotion. The quiet kind. Grief. Gratitude. Generosity. And then, as you're finishing up the rewritten ledger, you stumble upon the closing lines. An apology, written by one of the original scribes. "Too many hands on this clay. Too many voices. I've tried to make sense of it. Forgive the mess." It's signed only with a small spiral, like yours. You sit back, clay-streaked and sore, and press your mark into the final tablet, a fresh, clean record, categorized, legible, and just a little crooked. You bring it to the Merchants' Guild that evening. Enlil himself accepts it with a grunt and a distracted nod. But as you leave, a young clerk grabs your arm. "Thanks," she whispers. "It actually makes sense now." Back outside, you and Kiddo walk under a quiet sky, past shuttered stalls and sleeping goats. "You think anyone will ever read our ledgers thousands of years from now?" he asks. You shrug. "Maybe." He grins. "Then I hope they laugh." You smile. Because in this world of clay and numbers, it's not just about proof or policy. It's about people. Their tiny joys. Their tangled trades. Their imperfect, inkless hearts. The final sun of the harvest season slips low over the canals, gilding the temple rooftops and casting the courtyard in a soft, amber hush. You're back where it all began, under the wide sky, barefoot, surrounded by goats, tablets, and the smell of something faintly sweet and possibly fermented. Kidda hands you a fig. "For the ceremony," he says, chewing his own without much grace. "You've been invited to something rare tonight, the end of cycle reckoning. Every 3 years, the temple hosts a public closing of the books. Scribes, traders, elders, even children gather to celebrate the completed ledgers, proof that debts have been tallied, goats have been counted, twice, if you're wise, and no one owes anyone so much as a fish scale, for now. In the center of the square is a fire pit ringed with stones. Around it, clay tablets are stacked in bundles, some baked, some not, some tied with palm string or marked with colored ink. You recognize a few from your own hand. Your name shows up more now. On ledgers. On witness tablets. On a goat audit that was so thorough, it earned you a small statue made of hardened mud shaped like a confused ram. The head priest steps forward and speaks the ceremonial words. "By the moon, by the grain, by the scent of dry clay, let it be remembered." And with that, the first bundle of settled debts is tossed into the flames. Not all receipts are kept forever. Some are ceremonial. Others are purged to clear the slate. These aren't legal archives. These are emotional ones. Forgiven debts. Paid favors. Overdue promises finally fulfilled. The fire crackles. The crowd murmurs names, prayers, small jokes. Then it's your turn. You step forward with a tablet, the very first one you made that wasn't a disaster. It records a small barley trade from months ago. Both parties now laugh when they see each other in the market. You place the tablet gently into the flame. It hisses, crumbles. Gone. But not forgotten. Because the act of recording, and then letting go, is the soul of this sleepy little civilization. Historians still argue what these burnings meant. Were they legal closures? Ritual resets? Mere convenience for storage space? Maybe all three. You sit back beside Kiddu. He passes you a small jar of Cass. You sip. It's warm, flat, and still somehow comforting. Nearby, Ninurdasin dozes on a stack of baked receipts. Ashaya is handing out honey cakes shaped like goats. One child chases another with a reed tablet that says, "I owe you 1 fig forever." The stars appear, one by one. And the night drifts slower. You look around and realize, somehow, despite the dust and chaos and goat-related fraud, you belong here. In this world of quiet accounting and louder laughter. In this place where memory is pressed, sealed, passed hand to hand, and finally, forgiven in fire. The ledgers are closed. The moon is high. The goats are, for once, silent. It's time to sleep. So now, with the fire fading low and your head resting on a folded cloth that still smells faintly of baked barley, let your thoughts drift gently across this ancient place. Let the sounds quiet, goats settling in, scribes packing away their styluses, the last pot of cask going cold by the temple steps. There is peace here. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is accounted for. Every goat tallied. Every debt remembered, and when ready, released. Even the mismatched trades and the cracked receipts are part of the system. Even your clumsiest marks mattered. Because what we record, we value. And what we value, we carry forward, or let go, when the time is right. You feel the warmth of the fire still pulsing faintly nearby. The clay dust on your skin has settled. The weight of the tablet pouch on your belt is comforting now, not burdensome. A memory, not a task. There's no need to count anymore. You've done your part. Now let the soft hum of Mesopotamia fade into the background, the lullaby of history, slow and steady, the whisper of styluses, the flicker of oil lamps, the exhale of breath after one final trade is made. You're not just a witness anymore. You're part of the story. So close your eyes. Let the warmth linger. And let the numbers rest. Hey guys. My name is Stefan. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means a lot and I look forward to bringing you new topics soon. Stay kind, stay inspired, and I'll see you.